At the turn of the 19th century, a man born into slavery on the Breda plantation in Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, rose to command armies, outmaneuver empires, and bend the age of revolutions toward a new horizon of human freedom. François-Dominique Toussaint, later Louverture, the Opening, did not simply lead a revolt. He built a polity, reorganized a shattered economy, and forced Europe and the Americas to reckon with the unthinkable, that an enslaved population could defeat imperial powers and found a free black nation. His leadership sparked the world's only successful slave revolution and helped remake the Atlantic world. By the late 1700s, Saint-Domingue was France's richest colony, a global engine for sugar, coffee, and indigo, whose profits depended on one of the most brutal slave systems in the hemisphere. The population was sharply stratified: a small white elite, planters and merchants, a larger class of poor whites, petits blancs, a sizable and diverse free population of color, many prosperous landholders and artisans, and an immense majority of enslaved Africans and their descendants, subjected to exhausting labor, corporal punishment, and legal dehumanization. The colony's prosperity masked a chronic instability, racial hierarchies, economic rivalries, and the sheer violence of plantation life that would combust when revolutionary ideas and metropolitan turmoil cracked the imperial order. Born around 1743, Toussaint was enslaved but unusually mobile within plantation society. Literate and multilingual, he absorbed Catholic catechism, military histories, and Enlightenment texts. He was known for physical stamina, diplomacy, and a capacity to mediate disputes, traits that later translated into battlefield agility and statecraft. Manumitted in middle age, accounts vary but likely in the 1770s, he leased land, managed laborers, and cultivated horses, skills that gave him an intuitive grasp of logistics, terrain, and the dynamics of agricultural production. When the colony exploded in 1791, these assets, combined with a disciplined temperament and a strategic mind, propelled him rapidly upward. The great uprising that began in August 1791 was initially decentralized and ferocious, a slave war ignited by millenarian hopes, political rumor, and long-suppressed rage. Toussaint emerged first as a staff officer and organizer, building cavalry units, preserving supply lines and imposing discipline on volatile forces. In 1793-94, he allied with Spain, which held the eastern part of Hispaniola, leveraging resources and legitimacy against France. When the French National Convention abolished slavery in 1794, Toussaint pivoted decisively. He brought his experienced troops to the French Republican side. It was a shrewd moral and strategic calculation, tying the cause of emancipation to the fortunes of his army and to a legal decree Paris would struggle to revoke. As a French general, Toussaint dismantled the Spanish position and then wrecked a substantial British expeditionary force that sought to seize the colony amid the European wars. Disease and attrition devastated the British, but it was Toussaint's relentless campaigning, rapid marches, night attacks, scorched earth withdrawals when prudent, and ruthless denial of resources that made their footholds untenable. He built a formidable officer corps, including Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe, married military service to social mobility for formerly enslaved soldiers, and established himself as the indispensable arbiter of the colony's future. Victory posed a new challenge: how to prevent a devastated plantation economy from collapsing into famine while ensuring freedom could not be reversed. Toussaint's answer was a controversial program of agrarian militarism. He urged, and at times compelled, formerly enslaved workers to return to plantations, now with wages or profit sharing, under strict workplace regulations enforced by the army. He invited some planters back to restore expertise and foreign credit. Harsh, yes, and deeply resented in places, but he believed salaried, regimented agriculture was the only path to feed the population, avoid foreign domination, and prove that liberty could coexist with productivity. Meanwhile, he courted external partners. With British commanders, he negotiated truces and commercial openings. With the United States, hostile to revolutionary France during the Quasi-War, he fostered trade in provisions and military stores. These arrangements gave Saint-Domingue breathing room and revenue, while strengthening Toussaint's autonomy from Paris. Internal fissures, especially between Toussaint's northern regime and the southern stronghold led by the mixed-race general André Rigaud, erupted into civil war. The War of the Knives was brutal, sieges, reprisals, and political propaganda on all sides. Toussaint, assisted by Dessalines and Christophe, ultimately crushed Rigaud's forces, bringing the South under his command. The victory unified the colony militarily, but left a legacy of bitterness, especially among Southern free people of color, and amplified fears, both within and beyond the island, of Toussaint's growing personal power. In early 1801, Toussaint marched into Spanish Santo Domingo, eastern Hispaniola, abolishing slavery there and securing the entire island. That summer, a new constitution, drafted under his direction, affirmed emancipation, declared Catholicism the official religion, guaranteed property rights and equality under the law, and named Toussaint governor for life, with the power to appoint a successor. Formally, Saint-Domingue remained part of the French Empire. Functionally, Toussaint had created an autonomous abolitionist state under military-civil administration. He courted clergy to rebuild parish life, restricted disorderly worship, and aimed to forge a moral order to match the social one, a stable society where emancipation would be durable and respectable in European eyes. Toussaint's regime brought schools, roads, port repairs, and renewed exports, but also heavy taxation and a workplace code that workers saw as coercive. The tension exploded in 1801 when Hyacinthe Moïse, a talented general and Toussaint's nephew by adoption, backed rural protests against the plantation regime. Toussaint crushed the rebellion and had Moïse executed. It was the darkest moment of his rule, a sign of how far he would go to preserve order and international credibility, and a reminder that emancipation's meaning, free labor versus wage discipline on old estates, was bitterly contested among the formerly enslaved themselves. In metropolitan France, Napoleon Bonaparte viewed Toussaint's autonomy as insubordination and eyed the colony's wealth as vital to imperial dreams. In 1802, he sent a massive expedition under his brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc, with secret instructions to reassert control and, though not announced to Saint-Domingue's population, to prepare the ground for re-enslavement, already attempted in other French Caribbean colonies. The invasion met ferocious resistance. Cities changed hands, plantations burned once more, and yellow fever ripped through French ranks. Toussaint maneuvered between open battle and negotiation, seeking to preserve emancipation and avoid total ruination. Under a flag of truce, the French lured Toussaint into talks with promises of honor and security. Then they seized him. Deported to France, he was imprisoned at the icy Fort de Joux in the Jura Mountains. Isolated, ill, and interrogated, Toussaint refused to betray his officers or renounce emancipation. He died there in April 1803, months before his lieutenants drove the French from the island for good. His reported words to the French, "In overthrowing me you have cut down only the trunk of the tree of liberty. It will spring up again from the roots," proved prophetic. With Toussaint removed, Dessalines and others, convinced by French actions elsewhere that slavery would be restored if France prevailed, fought a total war for survival. Yellow fever and battlefield defeats shattered the expedition. On January 1, 1804, Dessalines proclaimed Haiti's independence, the first black republic, the second independent nation in the Western Hemisphere, and the only state born of a slave revolution. The geopolitical aftershocks were immense. France's failure in the Caribbean accelerated Napoleon's decision to sell Louisiana to the United States. Slaveholders across the Americas intensified repression out of fear of another Haiti. Abolitionists gained a potent example, and the global plantation system confronted a permanent breach in its logic. Toussaint's gifts were multidimensional. Military art. He excelled at mobility, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare, harrying foes, then striking when disease or supply shortages weakened them. Administration. He balanced provincial interests, co-opted rivals when possible, punished conspirators when necessary, and kept ports open so exports, and thus wages and rations, could flow. Diplomacy. He played Britain, the United States, and France against each other to secure autonomy. He wrote letters in a polished, confident prose that announced his government as a partner, not a supplicant. Limits. He could be austere, paternalistic, and uncompromising, traits that produced stability under siege, but at the cost of dissenting voices and rural freedoms. Critics then and now question whether Toussaint's labor regime compromised the very liberty he championed. His answer was pragmatic and bleak. Emancipation without production would invite famine and reconquest. A disciplined, paid workforce on reorganized plantations would secure food, pay soldiers, and prove to the world that black freedom did not mean economic collapse. Many laborers disagreed. They wanted land of their own, not old fields under new rules. This unresolved tension between collective survival in a hostile world and the immediate claims of personal autonomy haunted not only Toussaint's government, but also Haiti's long post-revolutionary struggle to balance subsistence, sovereignty, and growth. Toussaint restored the Catholic Church as a pillar of public order, inviting priests back, funding parishes and encouraging marriages and education, while discouraging unruly festivals and cracking down on some practices he associated with disorder. He saw faith as a civic resource, a means to cement moral discipline after the cataclysm of war. Yet the island's cultural life remained plural. African-derived spiritualities, Creole languages, and new civic rituals of liberty grew alongside Catholic rites, creating a revolutionary culture that was at once conservative in its desire for order and radical in its affirmation of black dignity and citizenship. Toussaint changed the conversation about rights and race. He took the universalist promises of the Enlightenment at their word and insisted they applied to the enslaved. The Haitian Revolution disrupted Atlantic slavery's political economy, inspired enslaved and free black communities, and complicated the policies of every colonial and post-colonial state in the Americas. It also exposed the contradictions of European liberalism, proclaiming liberty while sustaining slavery, and forced a reckoning that would take generations to unfold. Posterity has alternately sanctified and scolded Toussaint, saint of abolition, tyrant of labor, brilliant general, naive constitutionalist. Each reading captures a facet, but not the whole. What endures is the scale of his achievement and the seriousness of his purpose. He fought to make emancipation irreversible in a world determined to reverse it. He built institutions in a landscape scorched by war. He embodied the paradoxes of revolution, mercy and severity, principle and necessity, hope and fear. In debates about post-revolutionary order, transitional justice, economic reconstruction after catastrophe, and the legacies of slavery and colonialism, Toussaint's dilemmas remain urgent. How do new polities defend liberty without reproducing old coercions? How can a small nation extract fair terms in a hostile global economy? How do leaders keep a coalition together when its members desire different futures? Toussaint's career offers no easy answers, but it models a fierce commitment to freedom, joined to an unromantic understanding of power, logistics, and time.